my president of the SK and MDA, Joy Woodley. Good to be back, and for a very compelling topic, if you will. As you know, HealthWise is brought to you by the St. Kitts Division Medical and Dental Association in collaboration with ZIZ Studios. The topic we're discussing tonight is one of increasing concern, and as we talk through it, you'll understand why. But we want to be a bit proactive this time around, because not only is the world still dealing with waves of COVID-19 outbreaks, and we've come a long way since, but before we can get ourselves together, before some of us can actually get over the trauma of loss, over 6.3 million lives were lost during the COVID-19 pandemic thus far, before we can get over some of the misinformation, here we are again dealing with what is becoming an increasingly concerning public health disease in the form of monkeypox. Just on June 23rd, which was 1 month ago, the World Health Organization convened a panel of experts, and it was thought at that point that monkeypox was merely a disease which had only invaded a few countries, but had not met the criteria for a public health disease of international concern. But that has since changed. If I had to walk back that statement, as cases continue to grow. In the US, just in the last 3 weeks, cases have tripled. There were 2,000 cases in the US. And while that is still limited to a cluster of individuals, it goes without saying, not only are the lesions unsightly, there have been some deaths, of course, not a case fatality rate that nears the COVID-19 pandemic by any stretch. But certainly it is worth discussing. Those of you who have seen the lesions, I'm sure that you find them to be something unsightly, and a disease that we know very little of in this part of the world because it's been limited mostly to Central and West Africa until now. But clearly something has happened. Something has changed, and this is why I thought it was timely to bring on board tonight a panel of experts that I also have the privilege of calling colleagues of mine. So without any further ado, I want to introduce you to my expert panel. I have Dr. Sovik Ghosh to my right, Dr. Luis Pablo Herbe. I got it right? My Spanish isn't that bad after all. And a known face to us already on HealthWise, Dr. Felix Toka. Gentlemen, I'll pitch to you to introduce yourselves, starting with my good friend here, Sovik.
Thank you, good night, everybody. I am Dr. Sovik Ghosh. I am a professor of infectious disease and the director of the One Health Center for Zoonosis and Tropical Veterinary Medicine. I teach and research viruses at the Ross University School of Veterinary Medicine. Thank you.
Louis.
Good night, everyone. My name is Luis Pablo Herbe. I'm a veterinarian and an epidemiologist, and I work in veterinary public health. And I've been here at Ross for 3 years already. And my interests are very broad as epidemiologists too, just working with whatever requires us to work with. So I'm happy to be here.
Good evening, viewers. My name is Felix Toka. I'm a professor of immunology and virology at Ross. I'm interested in viruses. I've done research on viruses, including Smallpox. We'll be talking about Monkeypox, and I'm interested in the way they induce immunity in animals and humans as well.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. I think, just for the benefit of our audience, those who have not spent sufficient time going through what monkeypox is, I think a good place to start would be, and I just saw Felix use the term mousepox, which may have left a few individuals confused as to, are we still talking about the same disease here? But I think this is why we're here. We're here to debunk some of the myths. We're here to speak to whether there is a real cause for concern, if not alarm. I think it would do us well to perhaps start with an introduction into what is monkeypox, some of the characteristics, some of the clinical characteristics there, if you will, about the disease. So I'll pitch to you.
Yeah, thank you. We prepared a PowerPoint presentation as we speak. So may I have the first slide, please? Yeah, thank you so much. So this is, I think, a very correct time to have this discussion given the spike in cases of monkeypox in several countries where historically this disease has never been reported, but we thought it would be better to have a very brief outline of what this disease is all about before we proceed with the panel discussion. May I have the second slide, please? So basically monkeypox, as the name implies, is a pox virus that belongs to the family Poxviridae. In very simple language, it is a cousin of smallpox, but it causes a disease which is very much milder than that of smallpox. And monkeypox is a very large and complex DNA virus. May I have the next slide, please? So we are discussing monkeypox here because it causes clinical disease in humans, and very recently the World Health Organization has declared monkeypox a global emergency. May I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So before I get started, I should make it clear, and this is very important because we have a significant large population of monkeys on SenKits. So the name of the disease monkeypox is a misnomer. You know, like monkeypox virus was first identified in monkeys way back in the late 1950s, and because of that, and since then, the disease has been named as monkeypox. But I should make it clear that there is no conclusive evidence that the virus has originated in monkeys so far. So whatever we know so far on monkeypox suggests that rodents are the primary source of infection for humans, and humans acquire the infection from most likely rodents through bites and scratches or direct contact with the bodily fluid or blood or lesions of infected rodents. And then if humans consume improperly cooked meat from wildlife, that may be another possible source of transmission from animal to human. Until now, human-to-human transmission of monkeypox was not considered that relevant outside Africa, but now we are seeing an increase, multiple chains of human-to-human transmission, which is important concern. So it is very important to know how the virus is transmitted from human to human. So most likely human-to-human transmission is because of direct contact with the infectious rash, scabs or bodily fluids of an infected person. There is evidence that the virus can be transmitted by respiratory secretion if there is prolonged face-to-face contact or if there is intimate physical contact. And of course the virus is stable in the environment, so if any clothing or towels or linen they are contaminated with the infected material from an infected person and a healthy person touches those, they can acquire the infection. Unusual event of the current monkeypox outbreak is a large number of men who had sex with men are testing positive. But it is believed as of now that it is mainly because of close physical contact. It is not yet clear if the virus or monkeypox is a sexually transmitted disease. And of course, there is evidence of transmission of the virus in pregnant women from the mother through the placenta to the fetus. May we have the next slide, please? Yeah, now I would request Felix to speak briefly about the clinical signs, the diagnosis, the treatment and immunization options against monkeypox.
I think we are all interested to know what this disease looks like, when it begins and when it ends. Usually the incubation period is between 4 to 14 days from the moment an individual is infected to the time when the clinical manifestation is being. The pox that you saw on some of the previous pictures, it begins around 14 days. The infection itself, once it begins, we don't know whether the infected individuals are already shedding the virus. But in fact, the diagnosis of the disease starts when actually the pox have developed, because that's the source of material for what is used in the laboratory. Once the clinical signs begin, what we may notice start by the increase of temperature and also the enlargement of the lymph nodes, the draining lymph nodes, mostly the submandibular lymph nodes, the inguinal lymph nodes will get distended. That is enough worry for someone to go and seek for help. The illness, the disease itself takes about 2 to 4 weeks. And of course, infected individuals should isolate themselves. I think we are all used to the quarantine that we were exposed to during the COVID days. The isolation for monkeypox is slightly longer, 2 to 4 weeks. So until the pox actually have completely disappeared, that's when an individual is no longer infectious and now can come out of isolation. Complications can occur, but mostly for those who are immunocompromised. That means they've got other conditions that affect the immune system, then the course of the disease here might be serious. Secondary infection is something that we can also look at, particularly if these pox, they rupture and then they get infected, that can lead to secondary infections. And in some individuals, well, respiratory conditions can come into pneumonia. In rare cases, sepsis also has been described, and also encephalitis, meaning the nervous system, particularly the brain, is now involved. Can I look at the next slide, please? Now, this slide simply shows the comparison of monkeypox and smallpox, the fact that they belong to the same family of viruses and also the same genus. When we talk about monkeypox, we basically talk about 2 clades of viruses, one found in West Africa and the other one found in Central Africa. And of course, the reservoir are rodents. But then, of course, because initially the monkeys are those that showed the disease, so that's why this monkey name actually appears in here. If you look at the incubation period, as I said, it might vary, but the standard is between 4 to 14 days, and of course, the duration of the disease 2 to 4 weeks. But I want to draw your attention to the very bottom of this slide when you see the vaccine, and I think a lot of people are quite interested to find out exactly whether a vaccine is there, or we are going to start generating a vaccine from scratch like we did with COVID-19. Well, here I think the good news is that vaccine is already there, but it's a vaccine for smallpox, because these 2 viruses are quite related. So the smallpox vaccine actually has been used and will be used in those individuals that will require that vaccine. Now, if we look at monkeypox, smallpox, same lesions, same presentations, but we might see also similar presentation from chickenpox. However, chickenpox is a disease caused by a virus that belongs to a completely different virus in a different family. So those should not be mixed at all. Can we look at the last slide, please? Perhaps now what we are interested in, okay, how do we get tested for this? I think we are all used to the PCR. Probably certain people don't even want to hear PCR, because each time we want to travel to St. Kitts, we have to do PCR. Well, the same technique has been, will be applied and has been applied to answer whether an individual is infected with monkeypox. Although the reagents are going to be different, but it will be the same technique that will be used here. Now, perhaps the question to ask is, when can this test be done? Can I just go to the clinic and say, I want to be tested against monkeypox? Well, no, because there is no test available there commercially for the doctors to apply immediately. The doctor has to examine a patient and get an indication that they need to be tested for monkeypox. That's when they can collect the samples. Now, what do they collect? Okay, in COVID-19, I think we are all tired of having that vacuum put into your nose and the samples extracted. But here, the samples are different. We can't do anything before the disease manifests. So those pox that you saw on the skin of the pictures here, that is the source of the material that is used for diagnostic. In certain instances, urine can be collected and blood can be collected. But the problem with these 2 samples is that the amount of virus in those samples is very, very low, and the PCR tests are inconclusive. So it's a good thing to do the testing using those lesions collected from the patient. Well, lesions will appear only when the disease is already going. Now, in terms of treatment, is there anything to treat this condition? Well, good news is that yes, there are approved drugs to do that. There's a drug called tecovirimat, or commercially you can find under the name of TPOXX. This can be used and actually has been approved by many governments, European countries and also the US. So a patient can be treated with TPOXX. Vaccination itself, I mentioned of the smallpox vaccine. Yes, it can be used, and of course, the protection has been reported to be about 85% for those that are infected with smallpox. However, what we need to remember is that the smallpox vaccination ceased a long time ago. That was around in the 70s. And since then, in most populations, actually, the number of people who say completely naive, got no antigen experience, has increased. And perhaps this is the population now that might be vaccinated. Now, one can say, I was vaccinated a long time ago. Do I still have the immunity against monkeypox? Well, it's still there, but it is not enough. People in that area actually can still be infected, but the disease will be very, very, very mild. At least that's what we know right now. There are 2 vaccines that have been approved. Actually, if you talk about vaccines, we have actually several groups of these, but I would just like to point out to 2. The first one is ACAN 2000, which has been approved in the US, and also European countries use that. There's another one called Gynos. This has been approved also by FDA and the European countries. This may be found under different names in different countries. In Europe, it's called Imvanex. The Canadians would like to call it Invamil. Now, when you compare these 2, they all give the protection that is required. But, for example, ICAN 2000 may not be used in certain individuals who have conditions. For example, they are immunocompromised because it has some side effects that could be quite serious. So, if Gynos is available, most likely that's what the doctors will administer to such individuals.
Thank you, Felix. If anything at all, it's clear we have a lot to unpack here. We'll digest this for a few minutes while we take a break, and we'll get back and we'll begin to unpack this to make this information a lot more palatable to our audience. So we'll get a break from our sponsors and we'll be right back.
In these uncertain times, good health is a must. Let Quality Diagnostic Laboratory provide you with fast, accurate results of the medical laboratory tests that you need. At QDL, our qualified and experienced staff can provide a host of blood, urine, and other tests in a safe, confidential, comfortable, and welcoming environment. We are open Monday to Friday from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. and Saturdays to 12 noon. We are at the corner of Fines Avenue and Keon Street. Contact us at info@qualitydiagnosticlab.com or call 869-465-6657. And yes, si habla español. Quality Diagnostic Laboratory. Excellence in performance. In these uncertain times.
Welcome back. For those of you just joining us, we're discussing monkeypox. Is it the next pandemic? We have a series of information that we need to filter through. We have a panel of experts, the right guys to actually discuss some of the information that's coming through fast and furious. And just stick with us as we now pitch to Lewis, who will speak to us on some of the preventative measures for monkeypox.
Thank you again. So how do we prevent this? And that's a very good question. And there are 3 main aspects. The first one is to avoid direct contact. This is a disease of contact. So we're talking about contact, right? So touching other persons with the disease, touching the blister. So not necessarily intimate contact, but seriously close contact, the kind of contact you have at home with your close ones, etc. So that's slightly different from what we knew from COVID, right? So that would be the first one, reduce direct contact. It would be the next slide, please. Yeah, so there are some examples in the first block of options. So once we prevent skin-to-skin contact, we move to the different level, the second level, that it would be to avoid utensils and things that other persons with the disease have touched or have been intimately connected with. So it could be dirty clothes or towels or bedding, clothing, etc. So don't share those utensils. I'm not going to go that far, like a toothbrush, right? So that's the next level of contact we need to prevent. And then the third measure, and we are very familiar with these ones, are wear masks, gloves, and if you cannot avoid contact, at least be cautious, wash your hands, and try to reduce the exposure at the maximum. Next slide, please. Now, if you are sick with monkeypox, and again, we're very familiar with these measures, isolate at home. Nowadays, you can easily contact your physician, health worker, give them a call and ask for instructions. But stay home and don't get in direct contact with anyone if you have an active rash or other symptoms that look like monkeypox. And basically stay away from people. So, in my opinion, against monkeypox, isolation will be way more effective than from COVID, but we'll get on that later. And of course, vaccination, it's a tool that we have available and we should use, well, depending on the severity of the situation. So we'll get more into that. So that would be for me, Al.
Thank you, Louis. So, Shobik, I'm coming right back to you. From what we've heard so far, monkeypox isn't new. It's been endemic in areas of West and Central Africa, right? With a bit of fatality of varying degrees, 1 to 10%, as we saw. In 2003, there was an outbreak in the Midwestern states, in several states, and I think it originated from some animals which came from Ghana, then infected some prairie dogs, and then individuals who got in contact with those prairie dogs became infected. And now, fast forward to 2022, we are seeing an outbreak, the likes of which we've not seen before. How did this all start? How did we get here to where we are today?
Yeah, thanks, Al. May I have the next slide, please? Yeah, the next one. The next one, please. So as I said before, the monkeys are a bit angry because the disease is named monkeypox, but as I said before that the disease has been named monkeypox because it was first reported in monkeys way back in 1958 in a captive monkey colony in Denmark, and then there were a few reports of the disease again in captive monkeys in the US and at the Rotterdam Zoo in Netherlands. Now, the first report in human was in 1970. A 9-month-old girl was infected with the virus, and since then there has been cases of monkeypox in Africa since 1970. Now, eventually it was discovered that there are two major variants of the virus. One is the Central African variant, also known as the Congo Basin variant. And this variant is more common in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where there has been a spike of cases in the past several years. Now, what is important for us is the West African variant. Now, I should add here that the Central African variant is associated with 10% mortality rate. Luckily, the West African variant, which has spread outside Africa, has a lower case fatality rate or mortality rate. It's only 1% mortality rate compared to the Central African variant. Now, the West African variant was more common in Western Africa, but then for the first time in 2003, as Al pointed out, there were 47 cases of monkeypox in humans across 6 states in the US. And when they investigated, the infection in human was traced to prairie dogs, which got infected from rodents that were imported from Ghana. Now, what is important in the chronology of events that resulted in the situation that we are currently experiencing is monkeypox resurfaced in Nigeria in 2017 after a span of almost 40 years. And until then, monkeypox was primarily considered as a disease in the villages or in the rural areas in the fringes of the rainforest. For the first time, there were reports of transmission of monkeypox in urban areas. And when this publication came out, there was a warning in that publication that, well, this virus is no longer a virus in rural villages in the fringes of the rainforest, but it is spreading in urban areas. And then after that, between 2018 2021, there were a few scattered cases of monkeypox in Israel, Singapore, United Kingdom and US. But all these individuals had travel history to Nigeria. And all these cases were caused by the West African variant. And then starting May, there has been a significant spike of cases in monkeypox. As you can see here, this is the numbers of 24th July, which has increased by now, I guess. It started with the first case formally reported in UK around the 7th of May. And as of 24th July, we have, can I have the next slide, please? The next slide, please. Yeah.
In these uncertain times,
yeah, so as of 22nd July, 24th July, you can see that we have more than 16,000 cases across 74 countries, and most of these cases are in 68 countries that have never reported monkeypox before. May I have the next slide, please? And what is more important is that there has been cases of monkeypox recently in the Caribbean region, and although Jamaica, this data is as of 20th July, but a new case has been reported recently in Jamaica. May I have the next slide, please? So how monkeypox emerged from an African problem to a global problem? Well, we had the warnings, but it was largely ignored. The first warning was the worsening situation of monkeypox in Africa. There has been an increase in the number of cases in African countries over the years. Then there was a large outbreak that started in 2017 in Nigeria, which reported urban transmission. And then of course there were scattered cases in countries outside Africa, in US, Israel, Singapore and the United Kingdom. And this didn't attract much of attention, and since these warning signs were kind of ignored, so we ended up in a situation where we have so many cases outside Africa. And what are the factors that triggered this? Well, as Felix pointed out, that one of the primary factor was the cessation of the smallpox vaccine, which is supposed to offer protection against monkeypox, but since smallpox was officially declared eradicated in 1980, so there has been a cessation of smallpox vaccine, so the population became vulnerable to monkeypox. Then of course urbanization, global warming, climate change, hunting practices resulted in humans being exposed to rodents, which are believed to be the important carriers of this virus. And the increased human transmission rate, there are several hypotheses or speculations. One of course has to do with the evolution of virus, which we shall discuss eventually, but as of now it is not clear whether the mutations or changes in the virus has had any implications on the human to human transmission, but there is some preliminary evidence. And then of course lack of monitoring in African countries, change in the disease ecology from spread in rural areas to spread in urban areas. Because of increased international travel, the virus spread quite rapidly outside Africa recently, and longer incubation period that allowed that allowed individuals to escape detection at points of immigration. Yeah.
Thank you, Suvik. One of the questions that I was about to pitch to Felix, you kind of saved him from by having answered it yourself, which is in regards to mutations. But Felix, I listen to Suvik here and I tell myself, yes, cases, spiraling in West Africa. The world has not paid much attention to this as perhaps they should, right? At some point we'll pitch to Louis to tell us whether we should start paying attention now or whether it's too late, as one health official in the US stated. But something else has changed though. I mean, there's something about either our environment or interaction with animals or throwing caution to the wind. I understand that the monkeypox virus has an enormous genome, about 5 to 6 times that of SARS-CoV-2, which causes coronavirus. And that makes it particularly difficult to study, right, as you would have. But are we seeing any differences in the way in which this is spreading today versus how it spread back then? Is there also a difference in the virulence of the West African strain versus the one that we see in Central Africa? Because it seems to me that the one in West Africa, which has the lower case fatality rate, and thankfully so, seems to be spreading much quicker. But is there something that we're seeing today so far from, and I guess from the standpoint of a virologist like Felix, is there anything that we're seeing about this spread that is different and unique?
Yes, there is something quite different now. If we look back into the statistics that different countries are providing in terms of cases of monkeypox, the virus, and this is not to stigmatize anyone, the virus appears to be spreading in men that have sex with men. This is something very unusual in the way this virus is spreading. And this is the population perhaps that is well affected. But that is not to say it's the only population, because people having physical contact with those infected individuals also can get infected. In fact, I was just reading about a case of a child being infected, very young child being infected. But of course, the report says the child lives together with individuals, men who have sex with other men. So that is one thing that is different from the way this virus has presented itself. And then, of course, I mean, we're living now in one global village where travel is very easy now. For one to travel from Nigeria to the UK to the US, they can do it in less than 24 hours. So if an infected individual, and mind you here, if someone is infected, we don't know about that. When they develop the pox, that's when they become infectious. But what we don't know now, and this needs to be explained, in fact, very quickly, whether within the 4 to 14 days, individuals begin to secrete the virus, which they can pass on, for example, through body fluids and so on. We don't know that yet. So this is something also unusual that needs to be looked into quite carefully so that we can map out the measures of protecting those that are vulnerable to infection. And then, of course, when we talk about the virus itself, as Al mentioned, the pox virus has got very large genomes. They've got a lot of genes, and some of these genes actually, the virus uses those genes to escape from the immune system. And we don't know exactly now, this virus that is spreading, now how it differs in certain aspects from the one that is found in Central Africa. So this is now what we really need to move forward very quickly. And I suppose very soon we will know what the differences are. But the good thing is that this West African clade, although it is spreading, I think the virulence is still very low, and I think a few deaths have been reported, but not as many as we would expect, for example, if we were dealing with the Central African clade.
Right. And we are indeed so much better for it. So before we get to a break, there are some points that were made, and I really want to hone in on them because they're so important. Because our job is to inform individuals so as to break stigma. And I think one of the things I want to leave clear in people's mind is that there is no evidence that individuals who are gay or bisexual or men who have sex with men are no more susceptible to this virus than any one of us. Is that something we can take away from here?
Yes, that's very that's an important point you've raised. It's not to say they are more susceptible than others who do not, for example, engage in that practice. No, we are equally susceptible. It is just a matter of physical contact with the infected individual and people who will be infected.
One thing one has to be careful. Now, in this perspective, it is very important to look at the epidemiology or the pattern of spread of the virus. So the individuals or the gay community or the gay members that have tested positive, there is evidence that they visited gay festivals in Canary Island and in Antwerp. And there is evidence that they attended, there are some individuals who were at a sauna. So they have been to gatherings, and this is a very close-knit community. So it might be possible that the virus is spreading across the community because it's a close-knit community and they change partners frequently. But one thing one has to be careful about here is the nature of the lesions or the presentation of the disease. That is confusing a lot of researchers.
It is because, I mean, again, I spoke about this in my preamble, which was just how unsightly the lesions are. And I'm thinking at the point in which the lesions appear, you would think that there is perhaps less intimate contact. So it does, raise that sort of question, whether one is shedding the virus even before those lesions begin to appear? And that may be the real million-dollar question there for us to answer. But we can do so after the break. Let's take a word from our sponsors, and we'll be right back. Stick with us.
In these uncertain times, good health is a must. Let Quality Diagnostic Laboratory provide you with fast, accurate results of the medical laboratory tests that you need. At QDL, our qualified and experienced staff can provide a host of blood, urine, and other tests in a safe, confidential, comfortable, and welcoming environment. We are open Monday to Friday from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. and Saturdays to 12 noon. We are at the corner of Fines Avenue and Keon Street. Contact us at info@qualitydiagnosticlab.com or call 869-465-6657. And yes, si habla español. Quality Diagnostic Laboratory. Excellence in performance.
Thank you. Welcome back. This is HealthWise, brought to you by the SKNMD and the ZIZ Online. We are discussing monkeypox, an increasing health concern. In fact, the WHO has agreed and listed it as a public health concern of a public health emergency of international concern. I have in studio with me Dr. Sovik Ghosh, I have Dr. Luis Pablo Herbe, and I also have Dr. Felix Toka. Before the break, we were discussing, and I think we really tried to ensure that we leave it very clear in the minds of our audience that this is not a disease of gay and bisexual men. And that is wrong for a number of reasons. One, because the stigma attached to it, but also as well, it means that individuals who may not have that sexual orientation may throw caution to the wind. And we may find ourselves with a much bigger concern. So we touched on this, but because of your unique position at Ross in terms of the One Health aspect, I wondered whether from a One Health perspective, and two things stood out to me here, is the consuming of meats that are inadequately cooked. And anybody who remembers Wuhan in December 2019, this sort of sets up some alarm bells. What is it about One Health or our relationship with animal and our environment? Where are we going wrong? Because clearly there's a pattern here. I think we're seeing some similarities, and I think it would do us well to touch on this for a bit.
Yeah, thanks. May I have slide 16, please? Slide 16. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, so now why researchers are worried in countries where monkeypox has not been historically reported? Of course, our primary concern as of now is the increase in the number of human-to-human transmission. But as I said before, that it is believed that rodents are the primary carrier of the virus. So although there is no evidence as of now of transmission of the virus from humans to rodents, it cannot be ruled out, because basically if the virus can be transmitted from rodent to humans, the other way around may be a possibility, although there is no evidence as of now. Now what researchers are worried about is, what if in countries where monkeypox has not been historically reported and rodents constitute a significant population of mammals. I was reading somewhere that around 40% of the mammalian population is rodents, and if the virus is transmitted from humans to rodent, and what if the virus establishes in rodents, then that can be a persistent source of infection to humans. It can get established in wildlife population and can repeatedly infect humans. So that is what researchers are a bit concerned about. Now in this regard, I would also like to add that if you review the amount of material available on monkeypox in animals, unfortunately not much is known. There are at least 2 instances where the virus was isolated from rodents, and one was in Ivory Coast in 2012, and the other one was way back in Congo in 1985. Now there has been several serological evidence of monkeypox in rodents. So it is likely that rodents can carry the virus, so it is very important to monitor the rodent population alongside human population in areas where there has been cases. As of now, it is not yet known, it is unknown whether the virus can infect pets and other domestic animals, but it is recommended that if you have monkeypox like signs, you should not come in close contact with your pet, although I should reiterate, as of now there is no evidence and it is not known if monkeypox can infect pet dogs and pet cats.
So I'm gonna just sort of put you on the spot here, and any one of you for that matter, because I think any one of you are well qualified to answer this question. The statement "no evidence," are we saying that sufficient research has been done to try to unearth that evidence, or is it that there's a lack of evidence simply because we have not done sufficient research? Because I'm listening to this here and I'm a little confused, and I think it's important to clear that point.
Yeah, if I may, Al, as I said before when I started, on this topic, is that not much is known about monkeypox in wildlife. Studies on monkeypox in wildlife is very limited, and as I said, although it is believed that rodents are the primary source of infection to humans, to my knowledge, based on published data, there are only 2 instances where the virus has been isolated from rodent. There are some studies that provide serological evidence. Beyond that, other than the fact that the virus was detected in the prairie dogs traced to a pet shop in the US, nothing else is known about monkeypox outside Africa. So whatever information available on wildlife other than the US outbreak, which was of course pet prairie dog, limited studies available only from Africa. So it is too premature to say, and I agree with you that there is no conclusive evidence, but the conclusive evidence is the fact that there is no conclusive evidence. I should be careful here in saying that is based on very limited published scientific information, and that is where the concept of One Health comes in, the importance of monitoring wildlife alongside humans in places where there has been cases of monkeypox, and that is what researchers are worried about presently.
So given that the limited evidence, given the name and albeit a misnomer monkeypox, we are surrounded by monkeys on this island. Is there any concern there? Because we don't know. I mean, there's so many unknowns here, and I'm sure that in somebody's mind, we'll do our best to reassure folks that the name monkeypox was perhaps incorrectly attributed to this disease. But I'm sure someone somewhere is concerned that can an infected person pass this on to the monkeys that run in the wild and then find themselves in domestic settings, stealing mangoes and avocados and what have you? Is there a concern in that regard? And if not monkeys, is there any other mammal in our setting that represents that kind of concern? Louis or Felix, I don't hear.
Sure. As Shobik mentioned, there is no reported evidence of human passing this disease to animals. Okay, so we haven't ever seen that. It's possible, sure, we're all mammals, so apparently the virus can move around. So that's the first big hurdle. No, not even the first one. So the first big hurdle is to bring that the virus comes to the island through an infected person. That would be the highest possibility. If that happens first, then that person would have to ignore the signs and have to be very in close contact with non-human mammals. That's unlikely, but in the realm of the possibility, but very unlikely. And then to have that mammal being a monkey, I have never touched a monkey in 3 years, and I don't know how many of you have. So I would rule out the touching monkeys. It might be more maybe an indirect contact, but still kind of hard. And then that contact results in an infection of a monkey and then infection of the population of monkeys on the island. I find that, although possible, very unlikely. That's my humble opinion here. But this is just my opinion and based on the little we know about this. But I think we are not there yet.
Felix?
Yeah, actually, this is very important, and it's good that we understand it well. the fact that there's no evidence of humans passing virus to monkeys is okay. I think we understand that. But what we should remember that although we have monkeys here on the island, it's not everybody who interacts with those monkeys. Of course, we do have biomedical research centers here where monkeys are used. And believe me, those people working those monkeys, it is actually in other countries a requirement that they are vaccinated against smallpox because of the very fact that monkeypox can infect humans, and if they're in direct contact with these animals, that could be transmitted. Although there is no evidence for that. Just out of precaution, this is a group. In fact, if it comes to using the smallpox vaccine against monkeypox, that's the group that will be in the forefront to get the vaccine. So the possibility that they might pass the virus to the monkeys is really, I should say, it's not there. And of course, interaction of humans and monkeys here on the island, I don't think it's that rampant because monkeys usually keep a distance away from where humans are.
Except the guy who's at the cruise ship taking photos with the monkeys, right?
Yes. And I imagine if ever we had a case of monkeypox on the island, the government is going to make sure that even those working with monkeys around here, at least they take a break from that practice in order to limit the possibility that a human can transmit the virus to the monkeys. They are susceptible, but I don't think it is that easy to pass that virus to them.
So, I mean, we're a small country with limited resources, and I always think that we have an obligation to err on the side of caution when it comes to the approach to illnesses like this, especially one where there are so many unknowns. Would you recommend separating an infected person from the animal, be it what that animal may be, a cat? So in the course of an illness, does it make sense to separate an individual during that period of illness from an infected human being? Is that something that you recommend?
Yeah. Go ahead. Oh, okay. Yeah, so as I said before, of course, not much is known about monkeypox virus in other species of animals, but I should mention here that based on laboratory studies and based on studies on captive animals and experimental inoculation studies, it has been shown that monkeypox can infect a wide variety of rodents. And as of now, it is not yet known if the virus can infect livestock, if the virus can infect dogs and cat. So if a person is testing positive for monkeypox, given the fact that we don't know, means as of now, that if the virus can infect cats and dogs, or even livestock, that man should avoid close contact with animals of any kind.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. I suspect we may be due for another break, and we don't want to leave our sponsors behind. They're the reason why we keep this show going. So we'll take a break and we'll come right back where we will talk about testing and what we should be doing here on St. Kitts. Thank you. Stick with us. We'll be right back in a bit.
In these uncertain times, good health is a must. Let Quality Diagnostic Laboratory provide you with fast, accurate results of the medical laboratory tests that you need. At QDL, our qualified and experienced staff can provide a host of blood, urine, and other tests in a safe, confidential, comfortable, and welcoming environment. We are open Monday to Friday from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. and Saturdays to 12 noon. We are at the corner of Fines Avenue and Keon Street. Contact us at info@qualitydiagnosticlab.com or call 869-465-6657. And yes, si habla español. Quality Diagnostic Laboratory. Excellence in performance.
Thank you. Welcome back. If you are just joining us, this is HealthWise. We're discussing monkeypox and whether this is the next pandemic. We have a panel of experts here with us, and we have some interesting conversations. If you have been a part of the show, we may be opening the phone lines right about now. So the phone numbers are 466-2666. That's 466-2666, 662-8674. 767-4765, and if you're calling from overseas, 1239-645-400. So I mentioned before the break, this is a small country, we have limited resources. The question is, and it's already becoming a concern in the US, access to testing, access to vaccines. Is there a point at which, what is the trigger for testing, and how difficult is that, Felix, to set up something like that? Should we have a plan of a couple of months? What does that process look like?
The testing here will be a little bit different from what we've now become used to in terms of COVID. Now here it will be in the indication of the doctor to examine the patient first of all, and then determine whether they need a test. It's because of the way this virus is spread. It is through contact. Although respiratory aerosols can also pass on the virus, but there is a condition here for the respiratory aerosols to transmit the virus. People should be in close contact. For example, kissing, cuddling, when respiratory aerosol can easily be transmitted to the other person, then they can get infected. With COVID, well, the distance was slightly different, and there we could suspect someone is possibly infected if they were in a room where, let's say, 5-6 people were infected. So it's better we send them to the doctor, just go and get tested. Here, the doctor will look at the clinical manifestation of the infection and then collect the samples to be transmitted, samples to be sent to the laboratory for testing. And the best samples, as I mentioned earlier on, will be the lesions of the disease itself. So here, unless the virus is already being released before the clinical signs start. But so far, there is no evidence. The infectious individuals are those that are clinically manifesting the disease. So that's one aspect we need to remember in terms of testing. What is going to be done for the testing? I mentioned about the PCR, but I should also mention the fact that there is no commercially available test against for monkeypox. Here, of course, the laboratories that are doing the testing, usually these are government laboratories. Protocols for PCR protocols are there already established. So I can assume that now biotechnology companies have begun the rest in, for example, to produce a commercial test for that. So very soon, I don't know, maybe in a couple of months we might have one being released. But so far, mostly it's the responsibility of government-run laboratories that are doing the test. And I assume it would be the same if St. Kitts began testing for monkeypox.
Thank you. So in essence, anyone who's out there and you're looking to purchase an antigen test for COVID testing, you would advise against that, would you, Felix?
First of all, the antigen test for monkeypox doesn't exist, and the reason it doesn't exist is because the pox viruses, we just showed the information that they all belong to the same genus and the same virus. They are quite related antigenically. So if we are doing a rapid antigen test, we don't know what we are catching. We may be catching a different orthopox virus, which is not necessarily monkeypox. So that's why that is not there. But I mean, there is a lot of technology available now. Perhaps some companies might find which antigen to target specifically, which might fish out the monkeypox for us. But this is I think should be in development at the moment as we speak. Many companies are looking into that, I suppose.
So, Louis, and I want to take that path very cautiously. I was here, very, very, very early on in the pandemic, preaching vaccination, and that didn't go down too well with a lot of folks. But as a medical doctor, it would be remiss of me to not speak about the importance of vaccination. In fact, I asked myself, and I think serving this weekend, I sent you a message asking whether it is the arrogance of us as healthcare practitioners to claim victory and eradication of any one disease and stop vaccination altogether, and whether this is what it spawned us. We saw this weekend a case of polio, right, in New York, something we had allegedly eradicated, right? And here we are with smallpox. We are monitoring very closely the outbreak of the deadly Marburg virus, right, in areas of Africa. So we are somewhat more vulnerable. And Louis, do you think, would you advise if someone had access to a monkeypox vaccine today, that especially those who are not of an age that would have received the smallpox vaccine, should they be looking to get vaccinated? Are we at the stage for that type of mass vaccination for monkeypox?
At this stage, I think it should be more like a targeted vaccination. If the vaccine is available, we should aim for the high-risk groups, those groups that have high number of close contact with other persons, healthcare workers, as we see in men that have sex with men, and eventually, well, any other group that we detect that are at high risk. But I don't think we're at the stage where we need a mass world vaccination. It's too early for the resources we have available. We have to be cautious with what we have. So just I would do it selectively if possible, and then go for there. I mean, we'll ramp up the production for sure. It's already happening. So yeah, we have to be cautious. We don't have to panic and start doing those measures. I think at this level it's way more effective to tell people to look for clinical signs and isolate if necessary. That will cut the transmission chain for sure. So I think that's at the stage we're now.
Thank you for that. Our phone lines are open. The numbers are 466-2666, 662-8674, 767-4765. And if you're calling from overseas, the number is 1239-645-400. So, placing, the two viruses, the pox viruses and SARS-CoV-2 side by side, and I love the fact that I came in here a little despondent, but I hope, like the television audience, we're feeling a little more encouraged now, especially when every time Louis grabs the mic, I feel more and more encouraged that things are not looking too bad. This is not all doom and gloom. But can you speak, perhaps from a more scientific perspective, why is this not likely to turn out like the SARS-CoV-2 pandemic that we're currently confronting? If we look at these two viruses, just in their makeup, in terms of the pattern of spread, in terms of the mode of transmission, why are we not likely to go down the route of a pandemic? And that's to all of you, by the way.
I can speak to that. When COVID hit early 2020, we were sort of completely caught off guard. No vaccine in sight. There had been previous coronaviruses, the SARS, the MERS, but then this was a different virus, and what we had learned from them was not even applicable. But here we are in a much, much better situation because we have vaccines that were developed a long time ago. They did the work of stopping smallpox, okay? So we had those tools, and then those tools can be used today to contain this threat we have before us of monkeypox. So we are in a much better position to respond and limit the spread of this virus. So perhaps this is why we are not going to go down that road. I don't want to say quickly, it's because we have these tools already, and it should be possible for us to ramp up the production if need be and contain the virus. Of course, making the priorities that Dr. Pablo have mentioned here. Let's prioritize who gets the vaccine, target the populations that are at risk. Let's stop the virus in tracks, and this is possible because we have the tools at the moment.
And if I may add to that, and that's a very valid point that Felix has raised, and another thing is like the WHO declared monkeypox a global emergency last Saturday. And if you look at when WHO was really concerned about the COVID-19 situation, that was way after, more cases. So I think we have learned our lesson, the amount of suffering and loss that COVID-19 has inflicted on us. So we are more careful, we are more cautious, and of course this goes all the way down to the common people, the local the population. So there is an increased sense of awareness now. Like if WHO is saying that this is a medical emergency, a global emergency, one has to know what it is and has to be very careful about what it is. So I think this increased awareness, that kind of from what we learned from COVID is also very important and will play a very pivotal role in containing. And another aspect is of course more from the epidemiological perspective is the mode of transmission. Like COVID was a respiratory virus, and there has been studies that indicated that the virus can also be spread by other routes actually, whereas in this case of monkeypox it is more of a close human to human contact. And then although most of the cases the lesions are around the genitalia, but at least you do see lesions that indicate that the person might be infected. So these are some of the factors that I feel that might limit the spread compared to, of course, what we saw with the COVID-19 pandemic.
And that is even in light of the fact that the virus was just isolated in semen.
Yeah.
Could we be seeing more modes of transmission? The virus also lives outside the human body much longer than the SARS-CoV-2 virus does, and I think that's also an area of concern. If you also may clean the linen of an infected person and that sort of thing, or becoming in contact with some of the surfaces. So I mean, it's not without some concern in terms of modes of transmission, but yes.
Yeah, I'm thinking on an example. Maybe I was thinking on an airplane, or could be a bus here in St. Kitts. If the driver of the bus or a passenger of the bus had COVID and was without a mask, chances were high that people in that bus would get infected. Now, if one of the driver is with monkeypox and he just drives the car and maybe hands some dollars, chances are very low that the people on that bus will get infected. We need more than that. Or I don't know, a passenger in a plane. You don't touch people anymore. Even after COVID, it's helping us. We don't touch people. Yeah. And so this close contact don't happen a lot on a day-to-day basis. So I think that will reduce the spread largely of this virus. So yeah, I'm really hopeful.
Yeah, I agree with Louis, and some of the precautions that we have taken during COVID-19 and still we are adopting that, like simply wearing a mask. As Felix pointed out that, the virus can be spread by respiratory droplet if there is prolonged face-to-face contact, if you are close. Yeah. So those things may to some extent, but what is more important is COVID-19 has caused a lot of awareness about the implications, this kind of pandemics can inflict on the human population. And I think that scare, that fear, has led to people being more aware, and I think they'll adopt whatever the recommendations are from the medical fraternity or the public health fraternity.
I mean, and that's good. It hasn't done, everything to quell some of the doom and gloom, and some from leading health experts as well. And you may call them alarmists if you will, but even the former director of the FDA, and his statement was that the U.S. is losing the fight against monkeypox. And that statement from someone who who's a leading authority on health, issues of health, the question is what is at the base of such a statement? What actually compels one to make a statement where you find yourself in a situation where there are a mere 16,000 cases? It's limited to the cases can almost be traced because of some type of contact. And to your point, Louis, is that individual thinking that, like the SARS-CoV-2, as this disease continues to spread throughout population and geographic locations, some mutation might take place that may create a greater concern out of this? Is that something that is possible?
Yeah, I can speak about that. Okay, so I should add here with regards to the mutation that as of now not much is known about the nature of the genome, but yeah, a study was published recently in Nature where they sequenced the complete genomes of 15 of these strains from these different cases. Normally, as Felix pointed out, that monkeypox genome or the DNA is 7 times more longer than that of the COVID-19 genome, which of course is RNA virus. Pox viruses are stable, and normally the changes are kind of very limited, but in this case they found 50 mutations, which indicates that the rate of mutation is 6 to 12-fold more than what typically you would expect in pox viruses. Secondly, 3 of the changes are in immunogenic protein, a protein on the surface of the virus that is very crucial for the host immune system, that is the B21 protein. And more interestingly, they have found evidence of microevolution during human-to-human transmission. There has been 15 changes in viruses during human-to-human transmission. And as Felix pointed out initially, that one of the very important components of pox virus is the gain or the loss of genes, because that plays a very crucial role with the virus establishing itself in a host. At least 2 of the 15 strains that have been sequenced has lost around 913 nucleotide or a part of his DNA, and that part of his DNA is the accessory genes that are very critical for host adaptation. So there are certain signatures that indicate the virus has changed, but whether these changes has influenced the virulence or the transmissibility of the virus, there is no information on that. I think as time passes, more and more data will accumulate and we'll have a more clear picture.
Sure, Philip.
And to add on to what Dr. Ghosh has said, another difference here is we're dealing with a DNA virus. And if we go back to the way the smallpox vaccine was produced, it was not through, the technology that has been used on the COVID-19 virus. It was simply passaging the virus in cell lines. Okay, that way the virus mutated, actually became attenuated. What we mean by attenuation is that it no longer could cause disease. It could still infect the cells, but cannot cause disease. So I suppose this is what might happen if this virus is passed several times in individuals. I think eventually these mutations will amount to a virus that is not going to be that virulent, and perhaps we may not even see clinical signs. But that is just what I'm thinking. We don't know how this might progress. The vaccine that is produced by the Bavarian Nordic, it is the same vaccinia virus that was used in the previous vaccine, but what they've done is that, well, they have passaged it into the chicken embryo fibroblast, and then it has reduced its virulence, and now it's being used as a vaccine. Perhaps the first generation vaccines, that these ones we might see maybe going forward, where they have now gone to do the genetic engineering, removed a few non-essential genes to make it much safer. So I don't see here we might have evolution of a virus which would have gained function, like we are seeing in COVID. We have the BA.5, which has now changed into one which can infect people quite easily. I don't think this is what is going to happen with the monkeypox virus.
And if I may just add one sentence to what Felix pointed out, that was quite elaborate, is that most of the mutations that happen in viruses are silent. Well, it is the rare mutations that happens once in a blue moon that changes the virus. So we hope that the mutations that have accumulated in this virus so far may not have much implication, but as I said before, we are still to investigate that. Means only very preliminary data is available, and of course the situation is very recent. It takes time to do this kind of work.
Okay. Gentlemen, we're due for a break. What might be a final break from our sponsors. We'll break for that and we'll come back with some final thoughts. Yeah.
In these uncertain times, good health is a must. Let Quality Diagnostic Laboratory provide you with fast, accurate results of the medical laboratory tests that you need. At QDL, our qualified and experienced staff can provide a host of blood, urine, and other tests in a safe, confidential, comfortable, and welcoming environment. We are open Monday to Friday from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. and Saturdays to 12 noon. We are at the corner of Fines Avenue and Keon Street. Contact us at info@qualitydiagnosticlab.com or call 869-465-6657. And yes, si habla español. Quality Diagnostic Laboratory. Excellence in performance.
Welcome back. If you're joining us, not only are you late, but we are discussing monkeypox, the next pandemic. HealthWise is brought to you by the SKNMDA, which is the St. Kitts Nevis Medical and Dental Association, in collaboration with ZIZ. Our lines are open. Those of you who may wish to call, the numbers are 466, they're at the bottom of the screen, 2666, 662-8674, 869-767, 4765, and if you're calling from overseas, 1239-645-4500. So, during the break, gentlemen, we discussed very briefly in terms of what has happened and what has been happening in the African setting, in that where monkeypox has been endemic. And one thing that has come up is the possibility of a reservoir in the wildlife. right? So you have that sort of spill back into the animal population, which can then cause that constant reinfection. The first question is, has a reservoir outside of Africa been found? And is that one of the concerns that we should be having in the fact that can monkeypox, based on the number of cases we're seeing now, become endemic in our setting?
Okay, I can take on this. Means until now the perception was that monkeypox is primarily an African disease, minus the limited outbreak that we experienced in US in 2003. Now going back to that outbreak that happened in 2003, of course the source of the infection was the prairie dogs, which were pets, and that got infected from rodents that were imported from Ghana. Now they did perform surveillance studies in Wisconsin and Illinois in wildlife, and they couldn't find evidence of monkeypox virus, but one should be careful, that was a very limited outbreak situation. Now what researchers are worried about, especially One Health professionals, are not only the current spread of the virus between humans, but the fact that if the virus can be transmitted from humans to the rodents or other small mammals, and if it establishes in those population, and then there is transmission of the virus again back from these rodents to humans periodically. So that is what is a very important area that needs to be investigated. So what would be the recommendation, and I think already some studies have started in this regard, is that areas where you are seeing human cases of monkeypox, it is very important to perform surveillance studies in rodents to see whether the virus is doing rounds in the rodents. We should remember that when COVID-19 pandemic happened, there has been instances where the virus was transmitted from humans to mink, and that resulted in a huge culling of the mink population in Europe. There has been instances of transmission of the virus from humans to cat, and there is, at least to my knowledge, a case of where the virus was again retransmitted from cat back to the human, but that was a very rare event. So I think alongside the human population, in areas where there are a large number of cases, surveillance studies targeting the rodent and other small mammal population, including wildlife, is very, 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 very important.
So Louis, I'm going to pitch to you as the epidemiologist here on the set, and I really want to find out from you. I mean, you've given us some really reassuring news, and thank you for that. And not just platitudinous language; it's really based on science. So we're not looking at a pandemic, but how does this end? Where does this just run out of gas, and then eventually, or do we just forget about it at some point? And if we forget about it, it doesn't exist. Where do we go from here in terms of an end?
Yeah. Again, good question. Complicated one. So, I won't start with we don't know, but that's probably the right answer. But we are beyond the point where we can say we will ignore it. That's what we usually do when these outbreaks happen in countries, in developing countries. We just ignore them, and that's not right. And we should take care at that level to avoid the spread to other places. It's like having a house with 6 rooms and you totally ignore 2 of them. You just don't even turn the lights. You just let them do whatever they want. That's wrong. Anyway, we are already at the situation where the disease is spreading in all continents except Antarctica, as far as I know. But we know about it. We are afraid, but we are aware, and now WHO has already triggered the alarms. I think there will be a change from here on. Countries will have budget, countries will be aware that there's something going on. I mean, even some kids now, the WHO is telling us, hey guys, wake up. So we'll be doing monitoring, our population will be informed, so we'll be way more ready to tackle the disease if ever comes to the island. So if you push me, I think it will continue increasing a couple more months, and I hope, and that's kind of a hope because I'm a positive guy, that we'll make good steps, especially because we have the disease spreading fast in a particular group of high-risk people. So if we tackle and if we work with that people without stigmatizing, we can stop it. So I'm very positive about that. But stigma is number one enemy of public health. So we need to work with those communities and use the tools we have. Reduce contact, information, education, vaccination, and I think we can avoid the next pandemic.
Yeah, I would like to echo that positivity. I think this time we can contain this virus that is spreading among humans. We have the tools, we can use those. I would not be surprised if some governments reinstated vaccinating against smallpox, although this time targeting the monkeypox. We did it with smallpox. And the way and the reason that was easy to do, should I say, is because the smallpox virus was the only host was the human. There was no animal reservoir. But here it's a little bit different. We have an animal reservoir somewhere, so it won't be completely eradicated. So what we can do is just to protect the human who is susceptible, and the means of protecting the human are the vaccines that are already available. So these are the ones that we can use. Let's target the populations at risk, protect them, and cut the trail of the virus. And perhaps maybe we might just stop it, but it won't go away because there is a reservoir somewhere in the wild, or I don't know where.
Gentlemen, as we come up in time, I want to thank you for an incredible wealth of information. Not only that, but we didn't leave here with a message of doom and gloom. I think we did a really good public deed in terms of the information that was shared here. I think some of the key takeaways for me are, one, that there's no evidence that the next pandemic is at our doorstep. There's no evidence that this is a disease of gay or homosexual or men who have sex with men, right? There's no such evidence. I do want to ask you, as we get into our closing thoughts, and one thing that comes to mind, and I hear this, but as a medical doctor, I know how challenging it became. As medical practitioners, we were very optimistic that vaccine uptake of the COVID vaccine would have been much better than it turned out to be, and it really was, it did not pan out as we had hoped, and I fear that some damage was done in terms of the credibility of the medical community in that regard. And I wonder whether we will see the ripple effects of that in terms of how seriously people take this, especially if vaccination becomes a thing. I don't believe in vaccine mandates. I believe in education all the time, and this is why we have this show, right? So I worry about that. But as we get into our closing remarks, I want to ask you, about viruses, and this one in particular. What are some of our blind spots? Blind spots in terms of research, diagnosis? What are some of the things we're not thinking about that we should be thinking about, and containment? Are there any that comes to mind at this point? And you just use that opportunity to give a closing remarks as well at the same time. So I'll start with you, Shobik.
Yeah, thank you, Al. As a One Health professional, I would like to emphasize two things. And as Louis put it in a very nice way, the analogy, he kind of compared with, is that don't ignore those rooms. There is nothing called a country nowadays with regards to infectious disease. We are a global village. We are one planet. And with increase in international travel, with increase in urbanization, deforestation, climate change, global warming, humans are coming in close proximity to wildlife, and this is one of the key reasons that we are experiencing a lot of spillovers, which implies that viruses are kind of transmitted from wildlife to humans. So I think, alongside surveillance in humans, it is very important to perform routine surveillance studies in wildlife, especially, populations like rodents, which are normally the carriers of viruses, as has been the case based on whatever information is available on monkeypox. So I think surveillance in animal reservoirs is very important, and sometimes this helps actually, because if you perform a surveillance study, let us say in rodents in an area, and you detect the virus, and you immediately can sound the alarm bells, and the medical fraternity can take the precautions because the virus is already in that area. But unfortunately, in most cases, what happens, you see a large number of human cases, and then we start thinking retrospective, and then we start wildlife surveillance, and then we say, so this virus was from a civet, the virus was from a rodent. I think that the perception has to be changed,
Louis?
Yes, in terms of my message would be on going back to the basics. Are you being a medical doctor? You would be able to diagnose this disease without anything else than your knowledge and your eyes. I mean, probably the clinical signs are relatively well described and you will be able to recognize them. So our community, our medical community, actually everyone will be able to recognize those signs, and that's the first key to break the transmission chain. So if we are aware of those signs and we pay attention, with very few simple measures we can break the transmission chain, unless there's something we don't know. But I think that's a very positive message, and the medical community will be able to deal with this.
Alex?
Yeah, what I would say is what I've already said, that I think we are in a better position now to contain these. I think it's a question of the governments now to prioritize their at-risk groups that they would like to, for example, vaccinate. I don't know whether they're going to be mandates or they're going to be strongly encouraged to come on forward and get the vaccine. But one thing I would like to emphasize is, let's not forget about the source of the problem. West Africa, Central Africa, that's where the virus came from. Perhaps, as WHO or other governments are thinking about that, that is the area perhaps that might require some of those vaccines so that we can stop people there can become immune, get infected, so they won't be able to transmit the virus to others who are coming to visit those areas and going back to where they came from. Instead of carrying the virus, they will simply go back healthy as they came. I think let's not forget about those countries. They need that help, and they will need that help in terms of the vaccines that can stop the spread of the virus.
Thank you. For those of you who stuck with us throughout the show, I hope your, in terms of the knowledge base that you once had in monkeypox has been enriched to some extent. There's valuable information being shared, particularly the fact that we are a global village. We are not countries in all themselves. In fact, just before I came on the air tonight, I came across a news clip from one of our Caribbean sister nations, or sister Caribbean nations, that there's now a direct flight, which is Air Antigua, directly from West Africa to Antigua. Those are unprecedented, and it speaks to just how easy a disease can make its way to our shore. Again, I want to leave you with the message that stigma is not the weapon we have against this disease. Discriminating against any group of individuals is not the stigma we have against this disease. Yes, there are individuals who, by virtue of immunocompromise for one reason or the other, may be more susceptible, but not necessarily because of a lifestyle, right? So it's so important that we come together on this. The medical community needs to bring its head together. Look at this. Yes, I understand that there are challenges. There are challenges, as I said, in terms of some of the lack of credibility that has suffered throughout the pandemic. I also recognize that in the early days of this disease, it is so reminiscent of any run-of-the-mill disease that we see, and that may cause individuals to downplay some of the earlier symptoms. But history of contact is also important, right? Because the contact is not one of those contacts that I went to Rams and I was standing in line with someone. It's an intimate contact, so typically it's someone you would know very well, right? And if someone you know very well has demonstrated signs of illness, and you now demonstrate signs of that illness, I think that warrants concern. Get in touch with your medical doctor. I ask my colleagues as well to educate and inform yourselves. One of the pathognomonic signs of monkeypox is the lymph nodes, which are pretty large, pretty big. They're certainly different than anything that we've seen for chickenpox, which is very similar to this disease. So there's information out there that we can arm ourselves with. I like when patients come to me and they're equally informed and they challenge me to grow and to become a better practitioner. So let's work together. Let's come together on this. The SK and MDA will continue to do its job in terms of informing you and educating you. I want to thank you, gentlemen. I know it's late. Took you from your families. And I you know, Luis is clearly way past his bedtime, and he perhaps has to be in the golf course tomorrow again, chasing after his daughter on her bike. So you know, without any further ado, thank you, and good night.
In these uncertain times, good health is a must. Let Quality Diagnostic Laboratory provide you with fast, accurate results of the medical laboratory tests that you need. At QDL, our qualified and experienced staff can provide a host of blood, urine, and other tests in a safe, confidential, comfortable, and welcoming environment. We are open Monday to Friday from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. and Saturdays to 12 noon. We are at the corner of Fines Avenue and Keon Street. Contact us at info@qualitydiagnosticlab.com or call 869-465-6657. And yes, si habla español. Quality Diagnostic Laboratory. Excellence in performance.